First question, I'll start down on this end with John. Could you provide an example of an innovative partnering opportunity that has arisen due to the down economy?
Well, I'd first like to say thank you for the opportunity to be here today and let you all know how fortunate you are to have me on this panel this morning. As you heard a little bit earlier, I spent a lot of my career as a financial consultant, a certified financial planner, and I can humbly say that I was probably the best at that in Georgia. Maybe the U.S. And one of the reasons was, I think I can give you an example of one of the reasons, and that was a typical opening session that I would have with a new client, where they would ask me something like, most of my resources are tied up in the financial markets. How do you see the financial markets in the future, Mr. Elbert? And I would tell them with all the experience and knowledge that I had, your guess is as good as mine. And the bill is in the mail. But there is something about that I think is very unique and important, and that is that the client typically knows more about their business, their vision, their mission than we do. It's our knowledge and education as consultants that go into making them more successful and efficient in what they do. As far as the down economy and an example of something that we've had in the community service arena, being new in the TAG Education Collaborative with basically a restored organization, it's important for us to use limited resources and collaborate with other organizations who are in a similar situation. We recently started a summer internship program for rising high school seniors, the first one like it in Georgia, where we paid stipends for their work this summer. And we were having a difficult time attracting more girls to the program, and girls are an integral part of the growth in the technology sector for the future, we feel. And so we collaborated with Women in Technology, who provided us some time, some resources that allowed us to add 20% growth to what we were going to be doing in the internship program, and provided some girls with a great opportunity to get some application-based direct business opportunities that they wouldn't have ordinarily had.
The first quarter of this year was probably historically low for the amount of capital that has been provided into these companies. And so this all really puts a premium on our companies to leverage partnerships. And I would say that probably across the board, just about all of our companies are looking at partnering with other established players, consultants, to really gain access into the market and to do that faster. Because as soon as these entrepreneurs are able to raise an amount of resources to go after the opportunity, the clock is ticking. And so there's time that is the asset that they have to really manage. And these partnerships that many of our companies are forming are really important to make that happen. Today here we have two of our ATDC companies, MCN, Radhika Subramanian, I believe was here earlier this morning, and Izinda, which Sanjay Bhatia, who was here. And they have excellent opportunities and innovative options of how they've leveraged partners. And I encourage you guys later during the program to make sure you touch base. They have information at the back of the table and get a little bit of better understanding of how they're leveraging partnerships.
I have this one. First, I want to say that none of us should be up here. We should have Sig's wife up here, who raised 6 kids. She must have all kinds of partnerships going on, so much more important. But from a partnership standpoint, as everybody's trying to get additional funds, what we found from a nonprofit standpoint is actually working with other nonprofits and everybody's looking for the same funds. So how can you get funds into your organization? Well, we found that the same people might be looking for a grant of some sort, a very large grant, and they say, we need technology. But when they try and write this grant, they don't have the information to do the technology. So it's good for us to partner because we can write the technology, but we don't have the social impact. We can say, okay, all the technology is cool, but what kind of impact are we having? Are we saving battered families, or are we giving homes to the homeless? So mixing those two things, I think, drives a very important message to the grantor for giving that money. So again, I think the partnership comes from trying to gain the experience from all the organizations involved to make sure they provide the best message and the highest impact to the community, at least for us.
Well, you know, unfortunately, as part of the downturn, there have been a lot of people who are no longer employed. And I think one of the things that I have seen has been some of the creativity that companies have used along with HR consultants to figure out how to help these employees when they are going through a downsizing, you know, where it is retraining or where it is outplacement services or whatever. And I think that's something that, well, that kind of partnership with your consultant is what companies need to do to try to keep as much goodwill as possible during these difficult times. And for the employees who are there, you know, you work with your employee benefit consultants and so on to try to figure out how you provide adequate benefits and at the same time maybe increase the benefits, but cost containment is important.
The other thing I would mention, one other thing, is we have a great example of a partnership, and I forgot to mention it. Peter Rosen with HR Solutions is a consultant in the HR space, and just recently was looking at a way that he could give back to the entrepreneur community. And so we were able to work together to identify some options for our companies that would, you know, take into consideration some of their needs, but also took into consideration that, you know, they're not really at the point where they can write the big check, but are still interested in developing a relationship. And so, you know, Peter showed just tremendous leadership in putting that program together. We appreciate it, and I think it's a great example of innovation and giving back to the community.
How important are strategic partnerships with consultants in supporting the Georgia market? Can you give some examples of partnerships that have benefited both consultants and the greater market?
You know, to me, the one example, Peter may get tired talking about him. But, you know, I have had a couple of companies that he had worked with where it was important that we find out some data on salaries and so on about how we should be compensating our employees. And we wanted to be sure that we were properly compensating them, not overcompensating them, but properly compensating them, but at the same time trying to maintain cost. And Peter had done a great job in working with our two companies to help find those medium where we should play. You know, most of the time he didn't have to worry about finding people we were overpaying. It was mainly a case of where we were not properly paying people, and we needed to make some adjustment, and that was not only in salary, but sometimes it was in benefits, and sometimes it was in options.
I think it's extremely important for all the consultants to be involved in the community. I started last October volunteering for TechBridge and found it immensely gratifying, and then Kathleen asked me to stay on. But from a consulting standpoint and from a partnership standpoint, I don't even know where to start. We probably have 90 sponsors of consulting organizations and other organizations helping us out. As a matter of fact, JBN Senior, Dan, Mike, they're all here. They've done an extremely good job of putting together, for lack of better terms, a CRM tool just for TechBridge to better focus on which organizations, which nonprofits in the community would gain the most impact from using TechBridge services. So with that, we've been able to focus in on certain customers and create more impact for the community and raise the capacity of several organizations. So again, thank you for JBN, and I know they're here today.
We're going to go in order. Okay. So I'll mention a program that we've done for a couple of years with the GCLA, where usually I think it's in the fall or whatever, we have a showcase where we position some of our ATDC members and communicate, some of their value proposition and how these leading CIOs can use these technologies and these companies in their to accomplish their goals. And the interesting thing about this is it's a volunteer effort, and it is a opportunity to really deal with one of the major barriers to successful alliances. I was doing a little research and just looking at some of the research in this area, and of course, most companies will talk about strategic alliances and how important that is, and they'll say it's a big part of their revenues. But if you listen to some of the literature or read some of the literature, the success rate with these alliances is pretty low. I mean, I've seen some studies that said it's somewhere from like 5 to 25%. And one of the major areas I think that companies fail in is what culture mismatch. And I think this is really big for small companies, right? In terms of, it's funny, before I came to ATDC, I was working with a corporation in Chicago where we were helping startups leverage and partner with a Fortune, I guess it was a Fortune 100 company. And for the managers that I was supporting, if they really knew what was behind the scenes with these startups, they would go running and screaming. I mean, because just the pace of change and just the kind of procedures that you got to put in place for startups just is not the same culture for these larger companies. And so a part of this process was just helping to kind of bridge that gap. And, I think it was pretty valuable for the technology community.
Thank you. Don't really have much to add to that. We, however, are fortunate enough. We don't retain consultants, but we're fortunate enough to be part of an organization to have access to some of the best consultants in Atlanta, including Jabian and many of the others. So I think the importance to us, to amplify some of the things that have already been said, is to get the access to the other folks in the community who are doing some of the things that we can leverage off of and where they can leverage off of us to maximize our business.
What criteria should companies require for partnering with consultants? Are there certain aspects that are more important in a down economy?
I think experience is obviously an important piece. Back to, again, my days as a consultant, there's not much that I could do for a client other than hopefully have enough knowledge to be able to answer the questions that the organization was looking for. But also have as far as Georgia goes, have a macro knowledge of the playing field so that we can see what the collaborative opportunities are for our client to be able to maximize their abilities to survive in some cases and to grow and flourish in others. Another aspect I think that's very important is, and I think most important, is trust. The trust aspect is critical. Back in when I was doing business and consulting, and it's like this today on greater scales with you all, the client has to have faith that what you're giving him or her is moving them forward. And so the trust factor, I think, is the most important thing in a down economy, because there is no time for the client to waste. Thank you.
I would add just shortly a big opportunity. When you think about the overhead that you're going to have to put in place to manage these relationships, I mean, they're outside of your organization, so you got to dedicate some existing or additional calories to make it work on both sides. So I think it needs to be big enough so that you don't have to worry about fighting over the pie. And then the other thing is kind of related to that. I think the value proposition, what's in it for the other player needs to be obvious. And then one last thing I would mention is I think somewhere down the road, the company and partnering with the consultant organization or other alliance partners need to feel comfortable that the resources are going to put in place to make this happen I hear that in a lot of cases where these things fall off the tracks is because there might be buy-in up at headquarters or up at the executive level, but then when you look at the sales rep that's going to really make this happen and their compensation plan doesn't really jive with the strategic alliance, it's not going to happen. So some kind of way, if a company can get a sense that, throughout the organization there's buy-in, I think that's a good criteria.
I think if I were to say one thing, it would be results-oriented. So many times, I've been consultant and I've hired consultants, and sometimes you get consultants that'll, take your watch and then tell you what time it is. That's probably not what you want, right? You want the person that is going to be able to make whatever it is you want usable for you. So say, for instance, a small example, if it's a piece of software, that piece of software absolutely means nothing until you're actually using it. So the consultant has to have the ability to have the training, to make the people want to use it, to show the results of it, and to actually make it, before they leave, a usable product that is actually producing results. Otherwise, it was a totally useless waste of money.
I would just add one thing to all of this. You want to be sure that the consultant you are dealing with are innovative, because you can be results oriented, but if you're just the same old thing, the results, they may be there, but they won't necessarily be creative. You need somebody who really is, particularly in the downtime, that is thinking out of the box and who can understand what you really are trying to do and come up with a creative way. You can do the same thing over and over again, and a consultant can tell you, yeah, that's what you should do, but that may not be. So you need to look at a consultant who has really innovation in their background.